And Penn State and the Lions.
These two teams just plain don't like each other.
They're coming at the fumble. It looks like. Oh, who's got it? Who's at the bottom?
All right.
It's the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame.
Okay. It's us.
I'm getting some. Is it recording right now?
Yep.
Oh.
We just start talking.
Okay. We're talking navigating the university space, Chris.
Yep.
So let's think about in general. What does eSports contribute to a university in terms of academics and the university mission?
Gosh, I think are those the only two categories we're allowed to fulfill there?
I think let's start there and
Okay.
see where it goes from there. Like I could say, like when I read the university mission and the programs that are offered at the university, I think about enhancing the student experience, right?
Yep.
So what is it that students come here to college, to university, and maybe Boise State in particular, but in general, the university, what do they come here looking for? Why do they choose to come here as young adults? And again, how do we make the experience the best we possibly can? Because that's what the university is interested in doing. They want to bring students here.
Well, I think it's a marriage, right, between what the student wants and the experience that we want them to have, right? If we just put it all in their hands, tell us exactly what you want and we'll do it for you, then they miss out on enriching things. But if we say, no, you've got to do this because it's the way you become, a human, they'll resent it as well. It's got to be a blend between those things. But esports programs, like every other sporting program, gives them an opportunity to represent that university, to make it an unselfish experience. They may choose to play these sports because they want to excel in these sports. It might be a me decision, but it ends up being a we benefit. You discover things once you're inside of an environment like sports and esports that you didn't know when you went in, and that's okay. That
right, because universities are about discovery, right? They're about discovering and becoming, it's part of a maturity process, it's about becoming somebody better. It's about improving, and sometimes they don't know what that is until they get here. But what they do is they know that they like participating in certain activities. We want to be able to give them the opportunities to do those things, which they come to the university for, but also to perhaps find them pathways of growth that they hadn't had experienced or had knowledge of before they got here.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talk about this regularly. Sports and esports provide and offer the same things at a university. They give you a chance to be a part of a team, to learn to lose with grace, to win with with humility. They allow you to prepare for something that you're not completely in control of, which is rare, right? And that experience itself, where your actions affect other people, is really critical, that you have some of those experiences before you go out and start a family, or you go out and you lead a business. You have to know that you can control some things, you can't control others, and that and sports teach that. They also do a really nice job in allowing you to represent something bigger than yourself. I mean, I say regularly, the only difference between sports and esports is the E, right? They offer the same thing. The only difference is the E.
Mm-hmm. So it makes sense at a university because part of that university's mission is growth. It's to create citizens that are going to contribute back to society. It's about learning, obviously, but it's so much more than that, right? Yeah. So it's what is it that you can learn that makes better, well-rounded individuals that can then contribute back to society after they leave. So,
I mean, and that tends to be a more in the us column than a student column, right? The faculty column versus the student column. They appreciate those things eventually, but those aren't things that they're going to select from a menu that they want to accomplish, right?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But as far as the university's perspective, this is why they exist, right? This is why universities exist, is to do these things, whether or not the esports athletes know that that's what they're getting before they come here. They're leaving with that.
Yeah. Well, what about the students who don't participate in esports? What value does esports or any sport have on the other students?
That's a great question.
Right? I mean, it gives them something that belongs to this university that they can follow, support, root for, even contribute to with things that are not related to the athletic or esport endeavor.
And that goes along the same lines as any of the, whether it's a club-related sports, whether it's any sort of national exposure, a ranking system.
Debate
they
team.
take pride, debate, spirit squad, music. Any of those items ends up being contributory to an overall good experience by that individual. It's a feeling of belongingness.
Yep.
It's participation, even if it's at a peripheral level.
Yeah.
It becomes important for those students, right?
Yeah. Cool.
So, what do you think is an appropriate varsity program structure? Because when we think about how esports is structured, was structured with the first esports teams that came out at universities. They, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were integrated into programs that had
Athletic programs.
all-encompassing kinds of programs. So we're talking about smaller schools with a relatively smaller student body. So we're talking, 5,000 students or less, perhaps.
Yeah.
Liberal arts colleges, smaller private universities, where everything is sort of enveloped under one roof. So it's kind of a one-stop shop there, right? So you have the debate club is also the athletic department, is also the computer lab specialist, right? And it's like the one place that people go to congregate. And the teams have been and still are self-organizing for college students. The Heroes of the Dorm tournament that initially helped gain notoriety at the university levels because it's the team sports that were self-organized, team esports that were self-organized.
Yeah, not a lot of student leadership. Well, if you think about most of the big early successes in varsity esports are schools that had made a decision to go all in on athletics, right? Schools like Maryville, which has 1,400 students, 900 of them are student athletes. A school like Robert Morris, which has a little over 1,200, 800 of those are student athletes. Every imaginable sport. So taking esports and dropping it in allows them to attract. We didn't mention what's the value of an esports program to a university, but one of those things is that someone on the outside can look into that university and see that there is a place for them. Whether they'll be a part of that doesn't matter, but their community is represented there.
Inclusion,
right? Community. It gives them a chance. So you see those things, and it may make the university more attractive. Well, these schools have gone all in on this idea of we want people to come to our university. They'll play esports. They will attend for a much longer average than normal because they're associated with something concrete that they may not want to give up. When school gets hard, your desire to stay involved in cheerleading and band and athletics often will get you over those uncomfortable humps. So the survivability, the continuance of a degree, the success rate of students goes up, and these are well-founded in the literature, when they are tied to some activity or community on campus to which their participation is dependent on academic success.
So in terms of programmatic structure, though, so because these were relatively smaller units, as esports has grown, popularity has grown, varsity programs have gotten larger. They
didn't need that much. They needed an account code. They needed some computers they could use. They needed a coach, and well, there it is, right? You have another team. Now let's add field hockey, and now let's add beach volleyball, right? And
so when we think about universities that have a much larger student population, that are much more have modularized in terms of how things work,
siloed in a sense.
We see that traditional club or self-contained esport activities were often under the guise of a student affairs office.
Student affairs as a club, just like the Greek club or Quidditch. Right. Your Quidditch club.
Yeah. So they exist in those spaces. They get club recognition and get whatever amenities are offered to other clubs that are self-organized. Once we move into the varsity program kind of structure, there's different options for where that might belong.
Yeah.
So they could still exist under a student affairs kind of organization.
About 40% of schools now fit under that category.
And that includes like California Irvine, for example.
Correct.
Under the student affairs. So it goes through, then there's a dean of student affairs, and it's not an academic department. It's not an athletic department, but instead it's organized under the guise of student.
Right,
organized.
Everything that doesn't fit. Parking and enforcement, often security, the pool, rec center, those are all typically housed under student affairs and have their own leadership.
Right, sure. There's all those different pieces that act, in part of that university.
Yeah.
But in this case, to become a varsity or recognized as a varsity program, what might that mean? What does it mean to be a varsity program?
So one of the ways that varsity programs are often described is that you are an official recognized entity of that university, not a club, but an officially recognized entity, which gives you the right to, but not in every case, space, leadership and guidance from faculty. Sometimes that is money. Access to unique scholarships. Again, you're not guaranteed a scholarship, but you have access to scholarship structures, which the university then helps to distribute and administrate in many of these places. As a scholarship program that has its own scholarships associated with it, it requires more bandwidth for a university to administrate those, right? So they have to take on, a university has to take on those things. So varsity means those things, but mostly to everyone, it also means that you have the right, the unique right, to wear your school's color and represent your school's name in official competition. That varsity distinction then enables you access to other things. Some schools with access to tutoring, to additional training opportunities, to academic or athletic, in some cases, advising a different group of advisors,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, navigating that university space is really how you navigate the groups on campus. If there likely isn't a perfect fit for something like a varsity eSports in most schools' existing structure, and that's why you see it in different places as eSports is continuing to grow and ends up in different areas. To me, the university officials, whenever you have sort of an official designation, there's many facets that have to be coordinated to do that. They inherently involve space and money.
Right.
But one of the
where are you going to put it? Who's going to pay for it?
Right. And one of the key aspects is there is a measure of accountability along with decision making that goes along with having a designated varsity program that will really, to me, is a critical piece of the puzzle in terms of making or breaking how successful a program is going to be.
Right.
Yes, you want to include all those different facets. So we mentioned student affairs office. You also want to, if there's a separated athletic department, you're going to want to talk to the athletic folks. Yep. You are definitely going to want to talk to the academic colleges, figure out what majors, what academic space this may or may not be a good fit for. And you want the leadership in terms of deans, the provost and president also to be on board in order to get that designation. And of course, then there's the little pieces like legal, which you want to have that kind of status. So how do you go about getting that status?
Gosh, I think part of it is, and we have this conversation a fair amount of times. I'm convinced, and this is my opinion, that in order to get a university to move into the varsity space, it has to have a permanent advocate in place to lead that process. And this is not to disparage students in the least, but they are temporary citizens of this country. They're on a 4 or sometimes 10-year visa to this country called university.
Sure.
But they're temporary, and that's not to disparage their passion or their work, but often a question will be, who's going to handle this when that student leaves?
It's about sustainability, right? It's about sustainability, and it's about scale as well. Mm-hmm. So that has to be part of the plan if you're to ever get it approved at the university level.
Yeah. And so a lot of students will say, gosh, our university hates us. No, they don't hate you. They in fact love what you do, but they know they can't do what you do. There isn't somebody who wants to do what you do. And so starting this up and then having you leave is a problem, right?
Absolutely. So you need a champion.
You do.
At some level. And that champion, can that be a staff person?
It can be a
that
staff,
be an
it can be
adjunct
faculty.
Instructor,
it can be adjunct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so somebody that's saying, I'm going to take ownership of this program. I'm going to work with existing student groups. I'm going to reach out and make those connections with student affairs and athletics and legal and leadership and all those other kinds of pieces.
Well, another thing that I think that has to happen in this process is you have to have a vision for what you anticipate that it's going to look like. Because you'll be asked questions that you haven't considered, but if you have your vision in mind, it's easy to adapt that, right? It's easy to go, oh, well, I guess that means we would have to do this too. Tuberculosis. Not really.
That's why we have editing.
That's why we have editing.
Do we have a sneeze button?
Sneeze button. Dump it for 8 seconds.
So, okay, so fine. So now you've found the champion, that permanent staff person, that person. How do you go about convincing that person to take on the responsibility, first of all, to do all that self-organizing? Is there a salary that comes with this?
That's what you have to determine. Universities are organized and bargained on principles of workload, right? They recognize that you can't do everything, but that you have to do something. And let's put that in a column. Let's understand exactly what that is. And that's organized annually. And the problem with that is that if you've got a great idea this spring, we can put it into action next year. We say all the time, universities are battleships. They're very powerful, but they don't
slow moving.
They don't turn very quick.
No.
Turning is really hard in a battleship.
Absolutely. So you're looking at one easy route might be something like release time.
Yep.
It may be something to where, like, if you're adding certain staff, you can dedicate portions of that staff person or person's time. And then there's the question of how many champions do you need? Do you need initially to have a structure of one person that's the champion? I mean, I think there are plenty of examples out there, people that we know that have organized themselves. They're a one-person shop for all things esports for their university. They're the ambassador.
Or they began that way and then have expanded.
Coach, right. So all those duties that come with that leadership are on one person. However, as you see these teams get large, there's even more hoops to jump through. There's more decisions to be made. Spreading that accountability across multiple individuals seems to make sense.
It does. It does. You think about, and again, I think it's always valuable to call upon models created in other athletic or academic entities to see the way they do things. A college tennis or golf team tends to be a small operation in personnel terms. So how do they do it? What is the job of the coach? Is the coach to actually also schedule the games? Is it do they help schedule the travel? Who checks? You can start to ask those kinds of questions and ask, well, what kind of structure do you have in place to do this?
Well, it's great then to also borrow upon the expertise of those structures that already exist and say, how are you doing this? How are you navigating that space? What should this look like for someone who doesn't know? Or is stepping in initially and saying, I may know esports, but I don't know how travel works for the volleyball team.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of grade requirements exist for the debate team.
Right.
And how do I enforce those? Where do I find the resources on campus that are going to help me recruit and retain student athletes in the esports program?
And you need time to search out those connections. You have to think about your workload and how much time you have in a day. You have to figure out how many of those things you can accomplish in a week, because there's a never-ending string of those kinds of questions.
So let's talk on the particular situation in which you and I are in.
Yes.
The structure we chose
top of the world, right?
To formulate our esports varsity program within an academic department. Now, is that a common thing? What are the drawbacks and what are the advantages?
So in an academic department, it's interesting that of about the 62 varsity programs at United States colleges at the time of this recording, only 5 of them, no, more than 5 of them, but the 5 FBS schools, right? Bowl champ. Those are the ones who play football and could be in the national
championship.
championship.
Collegiate NCAA football tournament.
Right. The FBS group, all 5 of them are attached to academic departments, which is curious, right? Partly, one of the reasons that these large institutions have done that is because as big battleships, that's the fastest way to do it, right? A department has resources and space that they then decide this is important, and they move over and they say, we'd like to do this. And here are the people that are going to do it. Here's the space that we're going to use, and here's the money that we're going to use to take care of some of the immediate needs.
So the buy-in, at least at the department level and the college level, can exist without having too many hoops to jump through in terms of that battleship, and moving a little more quickly in the sense that workload release can be provided in the form of organization and creation of such a program. Is there any other advantages to being within an academic department versus something, say, within student services or within athletics?
Usually departments have a smaller leadership structure, and so little things that aren't really little, like deciding you need a piece of equipment and ordering it and paying for it, the approval process is pretty linear. It is to the person requesting through a specific channel, in almost all cases, to a decision maker who verifies, okay, there are funds, yes, we'll do that thing, and then it gets ordered. I don't know how convoluted other structures are. If I know some athletic departments have to declare a budget at the beginning of the year of exactly what they're going to spend in each category. Now, they can go over or under, but it's much harder to deliver on something like that in an environment where you're all competing for resources. So an athletic director has to make a determination, am I getting this for the tennis team but not something for the volleyball team? Well, a department doesn't have to do that.
A key piece of that, I think, could be that the way the money flows in and out of athletics versus an academic department is somewhat different. So I believe, and I don't know if this is the case everywhere, but in setting up an eSports program that is in essence a self-support program. So what that means is that it may take a little bit of funding in terms of startup, equipment, organization. There are ways that team then can support itself as it grows to a more mature status. So that could come in the form of LAN parties or renting the gaming and the esports specific machinery, the setup, the peripherals to other students and to folks outside the university structure. There could also be tournament and prize money that could provide income back to the esports team. There's also could be sponsorships, corporate sponsorships, and that kind of income that could come in the form of cash or equipment.
Yeah.
So in essence,
fees for events and camps.
Fees for events, camps, public participation. Yeah. Kinds of events that your esports athletes might be participating in. So, in that essence, the program would support itself. You're not asking for state monies. You're not asking for other university monies. It's not draining any of the existing already stretched budgets that exist on campus, but instead the idea is that this is a program that can sustain itself. And I think there's plenty of potential. It's one of the great things about esports programs is that it actually has the potential of earning some of that money back. And they're not doing bake sales in order to replenish the money that's coming out of jersey money or equipment money or travel money. So that's an important piece.
No snickerdoodles.
That's right. I think the other piece that's important to talk about here about why esports belongs in an academic environment or an academic structure rather than some other structure is because it lends itself so well to an existing job market, an emerging job market, and a diverse array of skills and academic
it's industry,
pieces,
right?
That work along with it. I mean, you often talk about the amount of knowledge and understanding that comes when you're broadcasting an event. There is data acquisition and data analysis that goes on, not just for players and assessing play, but also just in keeping track, archiving, information about team and team members and team performance. There are coaching aspects. It lends itself very well to much of the teaching landscape when it comes to collaboration, how you provide a division of labor within team-like environments, and how to be successful in that. I mean, that's project management 101, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. It gives them practical application of those things. Now, they're in some ways tangential to the program, right? You could say the same of football. The things that you have to do to prepare to take on an opponent in football teaches you a lot about life. Now, they may be mirrored in courses that you're taking, but they're tangential to the piece. But like nursing, eSports also leads into a field. If you are participating in nursing, or we can jump the tracks and go to, say, you're participating in athletics and you take courses in athletic training, you're building knowledge in both spaces so that you can move more easily into the workforce of those spaces. And a good program will also introduce you to the industry itself in a way that allows you to go into it with your eyes open. In some ways, students in eSports serve a practicum, in some places credited and others uncredited practicum, where they have the opportunity to try on different roles, from professional player all the way through manager, broadcaster, observer, statistician, all of those things, which could become careers for them. I've always been of the belief that one of the most valuable things you can do in a college program is learn enough about a career to know it's not for you. Right, to venture down a path and then hit the brakes.
Right, and if you really want your hobby to turn into your career,
right,
it's one of the things that you need, that practical experience at your university in order to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, because it may not be the thing that you think that it is. I think almost everyone I know has gone down a path of, I want to do this for a living, and then learned enough about it to go, oh, no, that's not what I thought it was.
What I thought it was going to be. Sure.
Huh.
So I think we've now seen some evidence here of why an academic department may be an appropriate choice, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the only choice. It may depend on the size and structure of the college or university in which you're at. It may depend on who the champion of a particular program is and how well it aligns or doesn't align within an academic space. One thing is for certain is that esports athletes come from all walks of life. They have different interests in terms of career.
Personalities,
but in supporting those career preparation classes and choices, whether it's theater, whether it's art, whether it's math, whether it's computer science, having an academic department for a home of a place like this can help foster that process of your students first, your esport athletes second.
Yeah. That's cool.
So what makes it an official entity? I think that is going to depend probably on what choices you make in terms of how you want to situate your esports program within your particular
who's going to have ownership of it within a university? And a lot of people forget that universities are collections of colleges, and those colleges are their own unique entity with their own funding sources, leadership.
They have a certain amount of autonomy within a larger structure. So colleges, in that respect, have a little bit more flexibility in terms of decision making, as you mentioned. So one example we can provide in terms of how to gain official status is within an academic department, you needed leadership from the department. To go with that champion, you needed to outline a vision in terms of structure, in terms of space, in terms of money, and where those funding sources are going to come from. You needed to have some evidence of worth, evidence on how it aligned well with your department, college, university's mission and goals, and some evidence of the number of students that are going to be participating in the activity. In our particular case, we then went to legal. We drafted all that, went to legal, asked them to draft, take that information and draft an internal MOU that would then be signed.
Memorandum of Understanding.
Right. Which would then be agreed upon through signature of the leadership, academic leadership that went from department to college and to provost.
Mm-hmm.
And what all information did that particular, did our legal come up with? We have an example
well, here's
right
a
here.
PDF example.
Don't
linked
mind
within.
reading. Yeah. Turn to page 17 in your textbook at this point. No, basically it's got the date of sort of incorporation, if you will, of the university eSports program. It discusses naming and references and who it's going to be describing within that internal MOU. It specifically names the cooperating department that is involved, as well as the college leadership that's involved, and may or may not include aspects, I want to say, not rules and regulations, but outlines decision-making power when it comes to esports competitions and the university's representative membership, which is what exactly that's what you want, right?
Right.
You don't want to show up at an esports competition as the varsity program from your school
and find
another group that's there,
right?
With something they bought from the university bookstore, and they showed up and said, "Yeah, we're the
official."
Right.
Well, no, you're not the official.
You're not the official, and we have the paperwork here to prove it.
Yeah.
But this sort of helps with that recognition as well. So, additional language would be academic department based, describing that the program would have the ability to provide student scholarships consistent with university financial aid requirements. The program may avail itself of sponsorships pursuant to the requirement of the existing university scholarship policy and with their directorship. The program may receive grant and gift funding that's subject to all applicable university policies and procedures. The program may brand and advertise itself in conformance with university brand requirements, including the Director of Trademark and Licensing. And then it gives some additional information about termination of the MOU and what would be required there. I want to call it legalese, but just some things that are very important to the university in having a permanent structure. In witness thereof, then you have the directorship of your esports program. You have your college, again, your department, your college, and your provost signatures. And then you can go ahead and rack that up as it being official.
It's just as easy as that.
It's just as simple as that. I don't know why everybody's not doing it.
Seriously. I think you can pick up an esports program at the 7-Eleven.
What's an appropriate timeline to expect to get all this done?
Schools work, comfortably in annual and semester-driven pieces. And to get something off the ground like this, you probably will need at least a year. Sorry. We didn't wait on that. We moved much quicker, but velocity adds discomfort, right? Things that are not quite in place at the time that you want. Often it works well to pick the date you'd like something to begin and work backwards from there. If we want to start competing on this day, when do we need to have our teams selected? Well, when do we need to notify? When is the team selection going to happen? When are we going to notify people of the team's process, and how are we going to take, what are all this, and just work backwards.
At the same time, in essence, selling that the program exists in essence to all those myriad of entities that exist in a university space that have to be introduced at some level to your program. And talk about it, describe all those facets that we just went over, a little bit about what their most interest is in. And I would say in the first 6 months of our particular program, we have split time between quite a number of different departments at the university, and that would include marketing and branding. It would include heavy involvement in scholarships, and sponsorships. Actually.
Sponsorships, right?
We've had meetings with admissions. We've had meetings with actually across 2 different colleges, and a number of the support staff and personnel there. Everything from purchasing to hiring of work-study folks to
admissions,
information technology, presentations to alumni associations, to athletic associations, to foundations.
Maybe the biggest and most important piece of starting a program like this, in addition to recognition, is being prepared to tell the story of what this is, where it fits, and how it will go forward. There's always a danger in trying to give people too much information. So crafting the kind of story you need to quickly set someone at ease about what this is and how it fits is really important. Your message design must be on point or you won't be successful. If it's muddled with all of the little nuances from eSports connection to the NBA all the way through to even more minutia-driven elements, you won't find the support that you want. But if they can wrap their mind around it referentially, they get what it's connected to. They get what it's like. That this is the X of Y. They're like, oh, I understand it now.
So maybe seek out your instructional design specialist on your campus and say, this is the message in which I need to produce.
How do I get this message out? Yeah.
And then how do I breadcrumb that message?
You talk about breadcrumbing a little bit as a technique.
I do like the idea of breadcrumbing. And what that means is you're giving whoever your audience is, and again, when you're starting your program, you're making this presentation to a lot of different people that have different interests. You have the people that are just concerned with money, just concerned with space, just concerned with workload, everyone. And then in order to tell that story all the way up to your university president,
who will see what you do as you're in opposition to order, right? Because they have it in order.
It's something new and it's disruptive. It's not falling within the existing space cleanly and easily in most cases. So you're providing little pieces as you go, and you don't want to hit them over the head with the hammer here. You want to be able to provide that message just a little piece at a time. And if you do it effectively, which is it's pretty easy to do with eSports because it's a compelling story to begin with. And all the evidence is there. It's just a matter of feeding it to your audience in the right size over the right amount of time in order to get them to A, back you and your idea, and B, to help you move things as swiftly as you need them to. Because invariably, everyone that's watching this and everyone that's going to be reading about this, they're already going to feel like they're behind.
Yeah. A good way to describe it is you want people to approach the consumption of more knowledge about eSports like a little bowl of pistachios, right? That you can take just a couple and you figure out how it works and you enjoy those, but then you want a little bit more, right? It's always available to just get a little bit more. It's not a meal, but it allows someone to just take in a little more and a little more and a little more comfortably.
Yeah. Although I have a hard time getting pistachios open. Because
you got to
crack just a little bit. I got to try to open them on my bottom.
You got to bail on the ones that are just not split enough. You just got to throw them right back in.
Oh, you throw them back in?
Yep.
You handle them first, and then you throw them back in?
Well, they got a shell on them, so they're all right.
That's disgusting.
Don't get your fingers out of my pistachios.
Remind me not to eat mixed nuts in your company.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
All right. I think that'll do it for this session. Okay.
All righty.
How long were we on?